He slid a check across the marble table like it was a business deal. $8 million. The ink was still wet. His cufflinks caught the morning light, expensive and cold, just like the man wearing them. William Harper didn't blink when he said, "This should keep you quiet, Talia." Those 7 words didn't just split the air. They split my life clean in two. For a moment I couldn't move. The steam from my untouched coffee rose between us, twisting into the silence. I stared at the check, the numbers so bold they looked like a dare. And for the first time since the day I met him, I realized what that look in his eyes really meant. It wasn't love. It was ownership. Before I tell you what happened next, remember this. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. So don't move, don't scroll, because what I did after that check slid across the table, well, let's just say he never saw it coming. I used to think I understood William. When we met 10 years ago, he was already the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone else straighten up. Sharp suit, sharper smile. The kind of charm that makes you forget to guard your heart. I was 26, a designer with a vision board full of dreams and deadlines, raised by a mother who scrubbed other people's floors to make sure I never had to. I didn't grow up around men who wore watches that cost more than cars, so when William walked into my studio that day asking about color palettes for his new penthouse, I thought I'd just landed my biggest client. I didn't know I'd just met the man who would spend years teaching me how expensive trust can be. He called me impressive, in that tone people use when they're surprised a black woman can be both talented and confident. I laughed it off, told myself it was just a compliment. But little moments like that, they add up. At dinners, his friends would say things like, "Talia, you speak so well," or, "You must be the lucky one." I smiled through it. I always did. My mother used to say, "Don't fight every battle, baby. Save your strength for the war." Back then I didn't even know there'd be one. When we married, people said we looked like a magazine cover. Me in white silk, him in tailored navy, our skin tones a contrast that photographers adored. Behind every lens, I could feel the same unspoken question: what's a man like him doing with a woman like her? William used to joke that I made his world look more diverse. I used to think he meant it sweetly. Now I know better. He liked me best when I made him look good. When I hosted dinners that impressed his colleagues. When my laughter filled the spaces that made his investors comfortable. And I played my part. I built a home that felt alive, filled it with art and warmth, raised our daughter Chloe to believe her father hung the moon. She was 6 when I realized he'd already started breaking it. It started small work trips that lasted longer than planned, phone calls he took in other rooms. The smell of a different perfume on his collar one night, floral and foreign. I asked about it once, half joking. He smiled and said, "Don't start acting like one of those women, Talia. Those women. The kind who ask questions. The kind who don't know their place. But when you've lived your life proving you belong, you learn to read the smallest signs." His late nights multiplied. His laughter on the phone didn't sound like the laughter he gave me. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself a lot of lies before I stopped believing his. The night I found out for sure, it was by accident. He'd left his iPad unlocked on the counter, still open to a message thread that wasn't meant for me. Her name was Michelle, 28, blonde, a PR executive from one of his partner firms. The messages weren't just flirtatious. They were proof. Dinners, trips, promises, and photos, ones that made my stomach twist. I remember standing there in the kitchen, my reflection in the dark window behind the screen. I wasn't crying. I was too still for that. Betrayal has a sound, and that night it was the quiet hum of the refrigerator while the rest of the world slept. When he came home later, reeking of champagne and victory, I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. His story about closing a deal in Brisbane was rehearsed and hollow. He kissed my forehead like I was his audience, not his wife. And in that moment something inside me changed. Not anger, not heartbreak, something colder. Like a curtain dropping in my chest. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling until morning, memorizing the pattern of shadows on the wall. I thought about my mother again, about the things she used to say when the world tried to shrink her. When they try to write your worth in numbers, make them count every tear they caused. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this wasn't going to end with me walking away quietly. The next day he acted like nothing happened. He made coffee, hummed under his breath, kissed Chloe's cheek and went off to his empire. And I watched him go, realizing that the man I'd built a life with didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as furniture, polished, dependable, replaceable. So when he slid that check across the table 4 months later, offering me $8 million to disappear, he thought he was giving me closure. What he didn't know was that I'd already begun rewriting the story the day I found that message. He thought this was his negotiation. He didn't realize it was my opening move. The morning after that check, I walked through the house like a ghost, haunting my own success. Every corner held a memory I couldn't look at without flinching. The crystal chandeliers, the marble floors, the paintings I'd chosen because they made our world look cultured, all of it suddenly felt like evidence. Evidence of how well I'd decorated my own cage. William's cologne still lingered in the air, that heavy musk of arrogance and wealth. Chloe's laughter drifted from her room upstairs, the sound of innocence untouched by betrayal. I'd always told myself we built this life together, but now I could see it clearly. I'd been building while he'd been performing. The man had charm like glass, clear, reflective, and breakable the moment you looked too close. For the next few weeks, I played the role I'd perfected over years of surviving in his world, the calm, composed wife. I smiled when he spoke. I nodded at the right times. But inside something was shifting. Every lie he told, every late-night meeting, every staged apology became a layer of armor. The more he lied, the stronger I grew. When you've been underestimated your whole life, there comes a day when it stops feeling like an insult and starts feeling like a weapon. He took me to dinner at that rooftop restaurant downtown, the same one where he'd once proposed. The city lights reflected off his watch, and his words slid out like rehearsed lines from a movie he'd written for himself. "I know things have been rough, Talia," he said, reaching across the table. "I've made mistakes, but we can get back to us." His fingers brushed mine, the same fingers that had touched someone else's skin, and I felt nothing but disgust. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted his image restored. I was the trophy wife who looked perfect on paper, the balance to his ego. A successful black woman by his side made him look progressive, evolved, until she stopped smiling. That night I realized he wasn't ashamed of cheating. He was ashamed of being caught. He didn't fear losing me, he feared what my silence was worth. Every time he called me strong, it sounded less like admiration and more like warning. Strong enough to endure but not enough to escape. That was the balance he needed. I had to break it. I began to notice details I'd ignored before. His assistant, a nervous young man who avoided eye contact whenever I walked into the office. The sudden new accounts in his firm's name. The business trips that never appeared on his calendar. He'd started keeping a locked drawer in his study, one he'd once left open without a thought. And one night when he fell asleep drunk on the couch, I found the key. Inside the drawer was everything he didn't want me to see: documents, receipts, and a separate phone. Messages from another woman. A newer one. A different lie wrapped in a familiar pattern. She wasn't the first and she wouldn't be the last. I stood there holding the phone under the soft hum of the desk lamp, reading messages that felt like a script I'd already memorized. "I'll leave her soon. She doesn't make me feel alive anymore. You're different. They all say the same thing, don't they?" I looked at his sleeping body on the couch, his face peaceful like a man who believes he's untouchable, and I felt a stillness I can't explain. Not anger. Not grief. Just a deep, settled knowing he'd never see me coming. For days I pretended. I kissed him goodbye in the mornings, helped Chloe pack her lunch, smiled through small talk. But behind every smile I was planning. I reached out to Erica Sanders, my college friend who had built her career in forensic accounting. "I think my husband's hiding something," I told her. She didn't ask how I knew. Women like us don't need to. She just said, "Send me what you have." That night I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection. I barely recognized the woman looking back. The same face, same soft curls, same steady eyes, but sharper now, as if something inside had crystallized. I thought about how many times I'd swallowed insults at board meetings, ignored whispers about how I'd married up, smiled through every comment that reduced my achievements to charity. I'd learned to survive humiliation with grace. Now I was going to weaponize it. The next morning, while William rushed off to another meeting, I opened his laptop using the password he thought I didn't know: Chloe's birthday. That's the thing about arrogance. It makes people predictable. I copied files, contracts, bank statements. The more I saw, the more the truth unfolded like rot under polished wood. Hidden accounts. Payments to offshore companies. A condo registered under someone else's name. All signed with his confident, careless hand. I realized then that he didn't just cheat with women. He cheated everyone, his partners, his investors, even me. He thought power made him untouchable. But the same systems he used to hide his lies were about to expose him. Because when men like William fall, they don't crumble quietly. They collapse loud enough for the world to hear. That night when he kissed my forehead before bed, I smiled again. He mistook it for peace. It wasn't. It was calculation. I'd spent years being the kind of woman he could show off. Now I was going to be the kind of woman he'd never forget. Erica didn't waste time. Within 2 days she called me from her office, her voice low but urgent. "Talia, whatever he's doing, it's big," she said. I could hear her typing, papers shuffling in the background. "There's movement between his accounts that doesn't add up. Transfers to holding companies that only exist on paper. And he's using your business as a funnel." My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice steady. "Can you prove it?" She paused. "Give me a week." That week was the longest of my life. Every day I woke up next to the man I was learning to unlove, made him coffee, kissed him goodbye, and spent the rest of the day quietly dismantling his empire. There's a particular kind of pain that comes from pretending you're still in love with someone who's already buried your trust. But pain is a teacher, and I was finally listening. At night, I'd lie awake next to him, watching the way he slept so soundly, the way his chest rose and fell like a man who believed the world bent for him. He had no idea that the woman lying inches away had already started writing his downfall. I'd memorized his patterns, the way he checked his phone before showering, the drawer where he kept his bank statements, the tone he used when he lied. I became fluent in his deceit. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of me I'd lost, the part that forgot her worth didn't come from proximity to power. Erica called again on a Tuesday afternoon. "Talia, I need you to sit down." My knees went weak before she even said the words. "He's got offshore accounts. Cayman Islands. 18 million hidden. And he's been paying bribes to secure zoning approvals for his projects." I felt cold all over. "You're sure?" "I triple-checked," she said. "He even forged your signature on one of the property loans. If this ever went public, they'd assume you were involved." My hands trembled. "So he's not just cheating on me, he's using me." Erica's silence was confirmation enough. That night, after I tucked Chloe into bed, I sat in the dark of the living room, the hum of the city outside the only sound. The skyline sparkled through the window, buildings he helped design, monuments to his ego. I realized something bitter and clear. The same world that questioned how a black woman like me could belong in those rooms was now being used to bury me. Every whisper, every condescending smile from his colleagues, they weren't accidents. They were rehearsals for this moment, where he tried to make me small enough to disappear. The next morning I called Erica again. "I want proof, everything. Copies, documents, screenshots." She hesitated. "Talia, what are you going to do?" "Whatever he's never seen me do," I said. I also reached out to Cal Porter, a private investigator recommended by a friend. He'd spent 20 years with the police before going independent. I met him at a small CAF downtown, where no one from William's world would ever think to look. Cal was calm, precise, the kind of man who looked like he'd seen every kind of deceit and still believed in justice. "You sure you want to dig this deep?" he asked. "Once we start, there's no going back." I stirred my coffee and said, "He's been digging for years. I'm just taking the shovel." Over the next month, we gathered everything: hidden payments, property deeds, emails linking him to bribery schemes. Cal even found video footage from one of William's development sites, showing illegal cash deliveries. Each new piece of evidence was like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. But the hardest part wasn't the investigation, it was the performance. I had to keep smiling. Hosting dinners. Laughing at his jokes. Pretending not to notice the scent of another woman on his shirts. There were nights I wanted to scream, to tell him I knew everything, but I couldn't risk it. Power doesn't fall with noise. It crumbles with precision. One evening I was in the kitchen pretending to review fabric samples when William came in. He wrapped his arms around me, his breath hot against my neck. "You've been distant lately," he murmured. "Everything okay?" I smiled faintly, leaned back into him just enough to fool him. "Just tired," I said. He kissed my shoulder. "You know I'd do anything for you." I looked down at the marble counter, the same place where he'd later slide that check, and whispered, "I know." The next morning Cal sent me the final report. When I opened the file, it felt like staring at the blueprints of his destruction. There it was, proof of forged signatures, secret accounts, even connections to politicians he'd bribed. I printed the documents, each page heavier than the last. Then I placed them in a folder and locked it in my desk drawer. The war was coming and I was ready. That night, as I tucked Chloe into bed, she looked up at me with her wide, curious eyes. "Mommy, are you sad?" she asked. My throat tightened. "No, baby," I said softly, brushing her hair back. "I'm just getting ready." She smiled sleepily. "Ready for what?" I kissed her forehead. "For the truth." She nodded, too young to understand, but somehow I think she felt it, the quiet strength, the storm I'd been holding inside. For the first time in months I slept peacefully. Because I knew something he didn't. He might have built the empire, but I held the match. And soon he'd learn what happens when the woman you underestimate decides to stop being your alibi. The day he tried to buy me off, the sky was unnaturally bright, the kind of sharp sunlight that makes everything look cleaner than it really is. I was in the kitchen when I heard his car pull up, the low purr of the engine I'd once loved. He walked in wearing his tailored navy suit, smelling like polished wood and control. Behind him trailed a man in a gray suit carrying a leather briefcase. William didn't bother to introduce him properly. "Talia, this is Mr. Graves. He'll make sure everything goes smoothly." That word smoothly clung to the air like cologne. I already knew what was coming, but I let him play his scene. He sat at the table, pulled out a cashier's check and slid it across the marble surface, the sound of paper on stone sharper than any insult. $8 million, he said. "Clean break. You can keep the house in Melbourne, we'll split custody of Chloe, and you'll sign a non-disclosure agreement. It's more than fair." His tone was steady, confident, rehearsed. I stared at the check not because of the number but because of what it said about him. After everything, after our years together, our daughter, the sacrifices I made, he thought I was a problem to be settled with money. He leaned back, that familiar smirk tugging at his mouth. "You won't do better than this, Talia. You're 34, single mother, reputation tied to mine. Take it." His words cut deep, not because they surprised me but because they confirmed everything I already knew about him. He didn't see me as a woman. He saw me as an inconvenience. But beneath the calm mask I wore, my heart was beating slow and deliberate, the rhythm of someone who knows the next move belongs to her. I picked up the check, turned it over slowly, tracing the ink with my thumb. "You always did love to negotiate," I said softly. His smile widened. "And you always got emotional. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I smiled back, and for the first time in months I meant it. "You're right," I said. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out a folder and slid it toward him. "Here's my counteroffer." He blinked, confused, then opened it. The color drained from his face almost instantly. Inside were copies of the documents Erica and Cal had gathered: bank statements, property transfers, offshore account details, and proof of bribery payments. Each page was a confession written in his own hand. He flipped through them quickly, his breathing growing uneven. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. I folded my hands, keeping my voice even. "Let's just say the same skills that made me good at building your image made me even better at dismantling it." Mr. Graves looked pale. "William, we need to leave," William snapped, not taking his eyes off me. The lawyer hesitated, then gathered his briefcase and left quietly, as if he already knew what came next. William stood up, trying to regain control, but it was gone, bleeding out of him with every page he turned. "You think you can ruin me?" he said, his voice rising. "You don't understand how this works, Talia. They'll never believe you. You don't have the connections I do." I stood too, calm and steady. "You're right. I don't have your connections. But I do have your recordings." His eyes widened. "Recordings? Every time you bragged about cutting corners. Every time you joked about greasing palms to get what you wanted. Every time you said the rules didn't apply to people like you." I paused, watching the realization dawn on him. "I sent copies to the authorities this morning. The federal investigation will start before you finish your next sentence." He sank back into his chair, hands trembling, his face a storm of disbelief. "You wouldn't." I tilted my head. "You forged my name on a mortgage, William. You paid bribes in my company's name. You gambled with my freedom and thought I'd stay quiet because I'm supposed to be grateful." The words came out cold but sure. "I told you once I wouldn't leave you. I never said I wouldn't end you." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence between us. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. I could see the man I'd once loved shrinking in front of me, his confidence collapsing under the weight of exposure. He finally whispered, "You planned this." I met his eyes. Every second. I reached into my folder again and laid down another piece of paper, a check written in my name for $12 million. "This is what I froze from your accounts. Consider it a refund for the years you stole from me." He looked at it as if it were a weapon, and in a way it was. The empire he built on lies was gone, and he didn't even know it had crumbled until it was too late. When I turned to leave, he stood suddenly. "Talia, please think about Chloe." I stopped at the doorway, my hand on the frame. "I am," I said softly. "That's why I'm doing this." I walked outside, the sunlight blinding for a moment, the breeze cool against my skin. My car was waiting at the curb, engine humming quietly. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw William standing in the doorway, a man stripped bare of everything but regret. It should have made me feel vindicated, but all I felt was peace. Because the truth was, I hadn't destroyed him out of hate. I'd simply stopped protecting him. That night, when Chloe asked why Daddy didn't come home, I held her close and whispered, "Because sometimes people make choices that cost them the right to stay." She nodded sleepily, and as she drifted off, I realized that silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was victory. The next 48 hours unfolded like a movie I'd already seen in a dream. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing, Cal's name on the screen. "It's happening," he said simply. I turned on the TV and there it was. News anchors' voices layered over flashing headlines. "Real estate mogul under federal investigation." The camera showed William being escorted out of his office, face pale, jaw tight, his expensive suit wrinkled under the weight of exposure. For a moment, I just sat there on the couch, Chloe's cereal bowl still on the table, the morning sun spilling across the floor like nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside something lifted. Not triumph. Not vengeance. Just a quiet release, the kind that comes when the truth finally stops being heavy. Calls poured in. Reporters. Former friends. Even his mother, her voice shaking as she said, "Talia, please, think about what this will do to his reputation." I let out a hollow laugh. "Reputation? You mean the one he built on my back?" She fell silent. I didn't blame her. Some people spend their whole lives pretending not to see the men they raised. I wasn't one of them anymore. By evening, the entire city knew. His partners scrambled to distance themselves. His investors froze accounts. The empire that once felt untouchable cracked open overnight. I saw photos of him leaving the courthouse, flanked by lawyers, eyes hollow, hair undone. The same man who once walked through rooms expecting the world to bend now looked like he was waiting for permission to breathe. For weeks, my days felt like rewinding and replaying different lives. In one, I was the wife who endured. In another, I was the strategist who fought back. But in the one that mattered, I was just a mother trying to rebuild something honest. I spent mornings taking Chloe to school, watching her run ahead of me with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her laughter free of the tension that used to fill our home. She started sleeping through the night again. I did too. When the divorce papers were finalized, the judge awarded me full custody, the penthouse, and a settlement that made even the lawyers whisper. But the money wasn't the victory, it was the proof that silence had never been my weakness. It was my weapon. William didn't show up in court that day. His attorney said he was unwell. I didn't need to see him. Some chapters don't deserve revisiting. In the months that followed, I opened my own design firm again, this time with a new focus, helping women-owned businesses create safe, empowering workspaces. The first client was a single mother who'd left a toxic job after discovering her boss's harassment cover-ups. She told me, "I saw your story and I thought maybe I can start over too." That sentence alone made everything worth it. I named the firm Eden Design Studio because I wanted it to feel like rebirth, something that grows after the fire. Erica became my business partner and Cal joined our foundation as an advisor. Together we started the Worth Project, offering free financial consulting for women leaving controlling relationships. We taught them how to track accounts, how to protect themselves from manipulation disguised as love. Every story we heard carried echoes of my own, but each one ended stronger than it began. It reminded me that survival isn't quiet, it's steady. One night months later I saw William again. It wasn't planned. I was at the courthouse for a client's hearing and he was there for his own. He looked smaller, older. His once proud posture bent like the years had folded him in half. He tried to meet my eyes across the hall, mouthing the words, "I'm sorry." For a second I searched myself for anger, for resentment, for the woman who'd once begged for his honesty. She wasn't there anymore. All I felt was distance, like watching the tide pull something away that was never meant to stay. That night when I tucked Chloe into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked, "Mommy, are you happy now?" I smiled and brushed her hair back. "I am, baby. I really am." She thought for a moment, then said, "You're brave like the superheroes." I kissed her forehead. "No, sweetheart. I just remembered who I was before someone tried to make me forget." Sometimes, late at night, I think about that check, $8 million sitting on the table between us like a question. Back then he thought I'd take it and disappear. What he never understood was that my silence would have cost me everything. I didn't burn his empire to prove I was right. I did it to remind myself that I existed beyond his shadow. Now when people ask about that chapter of my life, I don't tell them about the fall. I tell them about the rebuild, the laughter that returned to my home, the mornings that don't start with dread, the mirror that finally reflects peace instead of endurance. Because that's what it means to choose yourself. It's not loud. It's not vengeful. It's quiet and freeing, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. William once told me, "Power is about who controls the room." He was wrong. Real power is walking out of that room and never needing to look back. Before you go, tell me something: if someone tried to put a price tag on your pain, would you take the money or the power back? If this story hit you in the heart, don't just scroll past it, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their worth. And subscribe for more stories that prove strength can't be bought. I'll be reading the comments tonight. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in Talia's place?